Trade deadline comes and goes. A couple of trades by the Sabres, and they got weirdly sentimental about it. We'll talk about it coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. The Sabres make 3 trades on deadline day. As it came and went, we saw 2/3 of the deals that we thought we were getting. Kyle Okposo on his way out to the Florida Panthers. Erik Johnson on his way out to the Philadelphia Flyers. Devin Cooley, a little minor league deal, goaltender for the Amherst, sent to San Jose for a 7th-round pick. We'll talk about mostly Okposo, Erik Johnson, and also Zemgus Girgensons still being here, and some incredible comments from the general manager on Girgensons in his post-deadline press conference that we've got to get to coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show, as we mentioned, by FanDuel. You can check us out on our text line. You can sign up, become a sortie today. Locked On Sabres text line. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres, and you can let me know what you want and include it on the show as a comment or a question. We like to go through it during games, newsy stuff as well, like here on deadline day. And it was a deadline day that, there aren't a lot of good deadline days, are there, for the Sabres? Now, in this case, they made their big trade earlier in the week. They already gave fans the trade everybody wanted to see. So the expectations were very low. And deadline day in the past has been what? You're trading your veteran players for late round picks, and you're not really doing anything of consequence. And you have to go back over a decade to get to the Sabres making a win now type of trade, whether that was a Dinas Zubris or a Brad Boys or a Rafi Torres or a Dominic Moore. There were a lot of those types of trades when Darcy Regier was the general manager, and really never since. So deadline day, this is what we get. I think there was a lot of annoying things to come out from KeyBank Center, in my opinion, on this Friday afternoon. We'll get to that. But breaking down some of these trades, looking at the landing spots as well, we'll start with the big news of the day, and that's that Kyle Okposo, the Sabres captain, was indeed traded. And he was traded to the Florida Panthers, the Stanley Cup favorites, which is absolutely a favor by Kevyn Adams and the Sabres. And he even said Okposo made it clear where he wanted to be. The Sabres clearly worked with him on that. I had speculated that Okposo could land more in a deal than you're expecting. That did not happen by any stretch of the imagination. And, a little of that might be what you get when you are kind of narrowing things down to one team. You don't have a lot of bidders, and the player's already not that amazing in the first place. So you get a 7th-round pick that is conditional, becomes a 5th if the Florida Panthers win the Stanley Cup. And the Sabres get a defenseman for Rochester that goes by the name of Kyle Okposo. You'll never hear me talk about him again. 24 years old, AHL defenseman, no potential whatsoever to ever see this guy in the NHL. So Okposo goes to Florida. Listen, on some level, good for him. Right? This guy has been here a long time. He worked his tail off. He came back from concussions. He became a leader in that locker room. He worked his butt off to make this team a destination, to make it a team that was going to be in a better place where he left it. He said that in his 1,000th game video. He said that in previous videos and interviews before, that he wanted to leave the Sabres in a better place than when he arrived. I don't quite know if he did that, though. But anyways, the Sabres trade their captain, and were willing to trade their captain, again, in large part because I think he wanted one last shot at a Stanley Cup, and this is the best place that he's going to get it. The weird thing to me is the Sabres parading Okposo around like he's some legend of the franchise. You would think that the Sabres were the Bills this week. The Bills, if you're not a Sabres and Bills fan, I know most fans are, but sometimes you take that for granted. They cut great players that won here in Buffalo. Tre'Davious White, Mitch Morse, Jordan Poyer, and others. Saran Neal, there are others. And you would think that Okposo won playoff rounds on this team. The way that the attitude was kind of stricken between the Sabres and him. And some of this is just, tribute videos, right? Like, this isn't necessarily a big deal. But Adams sounding so sentimental about Okposo in the press conference, it just really made me think about how this team in the last 10 years has been so bad, and who are the guys that they keep around? Who are the guys they treat the best in the locker room and after their playing careers? Who are the guys they treat the best? It's the guys that stunk. It's the guys that didn't win. Brian Giunta is a name for this. Matt Ellis is having a job on this staff even still because of what he did as a player. Okposo, I'm sure, is going to be some version of the same thing. Adam Mayer. Patrick Coletta. I don't want to take out all these guys. Some of them I think are really good at their jobs, including Coletta, by the way. And I think actually Adam Mayer is very good at the Academy of Hockey, but it's a very, consistent theme. You play on the fourth line for the Buffalo Sabres, they'll let you hang around and do whatever you want, and they'll treat you great. But if you're a top line player, I heard Chopin Bulldog and WGR talk about this on Friday afternoon. Has there ever been a great player in Sabres history, like an all-time great player that's left on good terms? Any of them? Eichel didn't leave on good terms. Reinhart didn't leave on good terms. Ryan O'Reilly didn't leave on good terms. Daniel Briere didn't leave on good terms. Chris Drury didn't leave on good terms. Dominic Hasek didn't. Pat LaFontaine didn't, twice as a player and as a manager. Did Alex McGillney? He got traded, so I don't know. I heard them talking about how Danny Gare got traded, and Rick Martin got traded, and Gilbert Perreault got into it with the team at the end of his career. Like, just Pekka got traded away after holding out for a season. Just every great player they've ever had leaves and wants to leave, and it doesn't always go well. But the bad players, now they can stick around and do whatever they want. You can have a job for life if you're a veteran role player on this team for a long enough period of time. So I don't know that this is the right chord to strike right now, but it's the energy that I'm feeling about what, after listening to the general manager speak about Okposo and also Zemgus Girgensons, I just cannot believe that there is such a level of respect for two players that have done nothing for this franchise. They've worked hard. They've been leaders. They've been professionals. They haven't achieved a thing in this organization, and they've had a damn decade to do it. Kyle Okposo's been here since 2016. Zemgus Girgensons been here since 2013. Achieve something. Do something on the ice that warrants the treatment that they've gotten. And I don't believe that they have gotten that. Okposo leaves. He was a captain. He was respected in that locker room. I'm not surprised, I guess, that this was kind of the chord that was struck for him leaving, but I just kind of can't believe it at the same time. So not much for the trade. He goes to Florida, probably going to have just a fourth line role. Might even be a guy that's kind of in and out of the lineup once it gets to playoff time. When we come back, so Okposo out, Girgensons stays. It's some alarming comments that were made from the GM about Girgensons in the future for Zemgus coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show by Factor Meals. Eating better is easy with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to go in just 2 minutes. You'll have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Also, there are more than 60 add-ons to help you stay fueled up and feel good all day long. What are you waiting for? Get started and get after your goals. 2-minute meals, fuel up fast with Factor's restaurant quality meals that are ready to heat and eat whatever you are. Pancakes, smoothies, plenty more. Discover a wide variety of easy options for the entire day, like breakfast, midday bites, and plenty more. Sign up and save. We've done the math. Factor is less expensive than takeout, and every meal is dietitian approved to be nutritious and delicious. Head to factormeals.com/Locked On NHL 50 and use code Locked On NHL 50 to get 50% off. That's code Locked On NHL 50 at factormeals.com/Locked On NHL 50 to get 50. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day and enjoying this trade deadline with us as best you can. Again, I don't want to be that upset. I mean, they made the trade I wanted to see. It just happened a little bit earlier in the week. Today was about different things, of course. Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, here for your 24/7, covering the top stories of sports with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, so the Sabres trade Kyle Okposo. They trade Erik Johnson. A little bit more on that coming up in a little bit. But another thing that they didn't do is they did not trade Zemgus Girgensons. And what Don Granato said, they also did not trade Victor Olofsson, by the way, if you're curious. Olofsson, Adams said he tried to trade him. Didn't have any takers. Not that surprising, right? That nobody was really interested. Kind of even sounded like he'd be willing to retain salary. But either way, he stays. Girgensons stays also. Adams on Zemgus Girgensons. Zemgus is so important within the fabric of this team. It's a different situation a little bit than Okposo is speaking. I think Zemgus has plenty of years ahead of him. Conversations were had with teams, but there wasn't the right deal to make. Excited to keep him. And then also mentioned the possibility of maybe he stays. Maybe they've talked contract. Holy cow. Zemgus stays. And I'm listening to the idea of him coming back again on this team. The analogy that I use for this is if there was a nuclear winter that wiped out the human race, but there was one person left alive on Earth, it would be Zemgus Girgensons in a Buffalo Sabres uniform. The guy just won't go away. And I don't mind the player. I kind of like the player. But just strike the right chord, man. When you've got a fan base that is as frustrated as they are, that is so wanting to see improvement and change, is there a staler idea to sell to the fans than, hey, for the 13th year in a row or 12th year in a row, we're going to bring back Girgensons again for a 6th contract? Really? We're really going to go down this path again as if anything is going to be different. Anything. You can't get better if you keep bringing back the same veteran piece over and over and over again. And it's another element here of, well, this is an indication that Zemgus has played a decade here and worked his tail off, and he's a member of the organization, and the organization loves him and respects him. And because of that, you don't get the calculated decision-making, the cold, calculated decision-making. Then remember in the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt, where he portrays Billy Beane from the Oakland A's, their general manager. And Billy Beane in that movie, and I'm assuming in real life too, didn't interact with the players at all because he wanted to be as calculated as possible. I know it's not 100% realistic in sports today. That you can just avoid the players and treat them like robots. And I don't know if I'd want that. But I want to treat these guys as, people I can trade, people I can move on from easier. I don't want to get too attached. It just feels like the Sabres do the complete opposite. They get attached. They get sentimental. And I think that gets in their way a lot. And it's almost more what Zemgus still being here kind of signifies more than what he actually is on the ice. I don't mind him on the ice. He's a super fast checking fourth liner that could put the puck in the back of the net once in a while, and he could do some penalty killing. He could play center and he could play wing. All that sounds pretty good to me as a fourth liner, but it's just about, doing something different and also treating the last 10 years is unacceptable, right? That is really the attitude you want to see. The GM, the owner, management saying the last 10 years are so unacceptable. If you're a part of that, you are not staying on this team. Sorry. That's the consequence. The consequence of falling short of expectations year after year after year is you got to find a new team. Sorry, we got to do something different. We're not going to bang our head on the wall every single year and do the same exact thing. But I think the Sabres quite often do the opposite. And I think Girgensons is an example of that. He is still here. And I want to not believe it. I want to not believe that they would actually bring him back again. I hope I'm right about that. If I'm wrong and they bring him back again, I don't even know. I don't know what to say about it. But it just feels like those two players, you're getting a lot of sentimental stuff about Okposo and Girgensons. They're being paraded around like they are legends of the franchise, and they're not. You don't get to be a legitimate legend, a Buffalo Sabres legend, unless you accomplish something. Accomplish anything. Anything. Get to the middle of the league, let alone the playoffs. Get to the middle of the league. When we come back, Erik Johnson out the door, and also a weird minor league trade that the Sabres made. We'll get to that when we come back. And also, what about this group? Are they ready to take over the leadership role that Okposo and Girgensons will vacate? That's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented by Indeed. No matter how the last game went, anytime you take the field or the ice, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you don't pay. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools with Indeed Instant Match assessments and virtual interviews. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Check out Indeed. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/locked-on. Offer valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/locked-on to claim your $75 job credit before March 31st. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Trade deadline day is over. The Sabres head into the rest of the season with what they've got. They made some roster moves as well, sending Ryan Johnson down to Rochester. This was also the deadline for, you had to paper transaction guys to Rochester to make them eligible for the AHL playoffs. So the Sabres did that with Ryan Johnson. But Adams said they're going to keep Johnson down there. And I actually like that. I think Kulich should be up here for the rest of the season. But I think Johnson makes more sense to go down because he could play big minutes in Rochester that are not available to him here in Buffalo. He's averaging less than 14 minutes a night on this team. And I'd like to see him play 20 a night for Rochester versus guys like Kulich. I think you could bring Kulich up and play him 17 minutes on a middle six line. So Johnson down, Kale Clegg, Tyson Jost up. They recalled some of the veterans from Rochester to fill in some of these roster holes that are left by Johnson out the door, Okposo out the door, and Middlestat earlier in the week. So that happened. You had a minor league trade. Devin Cooley, who was the number 5 goalie in the Sabres organization. I mean, he's behind Luukkonen. He's behind Levi. He's behind Comrie. He's behind Tokarski. He got called up a little bit early in the year. Maybe he gets more of an opportunity to play in the minor leagues for San Jose and develop into something. I don't know. Sabres get a 7th round pick. Okay, fine. But kind of more than they got. Well, not more, but about the same they got for Okposo. So that's a minor league trade that happened. And then Erik Johnson. We heard rumors about Erik Johnson dating back to the fall, or actually maybe right around the new year, that he was going to have a bit of a market, multiple teams trying to acquire him, and that is what happened. He ends up going to Philadelphia for a 4th round pick, and 4th round pick, pretty much nothing. A little bit better odds-wise than those last 2 rounds of the draft. You really see more of a jump once you get to round 2 than anything, but you get that steady increase on odds as you get to the 4th round. So they did fine. It actually did. That was more than I thought they would get for a guy that has 3 goals and 0 assists on the season. So Erik Johnson out. I do not tend to think he's going to make the Philadelphia Flyers a better team. I actually, of the trades, I think Okposo actually might help Florida as a 4th liner, putting, a few goals in the back of the net here and there. Johnson, I think Johnson is a guy that John Tortorella plays too much and could very well end up hurting that team in Philadelphia. So he goes at 35 years old, former Stanley Cup champion. Johnson's gone. Okposo, the captain, is gone. You still do have Zemgus Girgensons here, but again, I'm going to bet that he's gone. I hope I'm right. Is it time for the next wave of leaders? Adams seems to think so. I tend to think so, that it's time to turn the page to a new group of leaders in that locker room. And the 2 names that keep popping up as guys that have become more of a voice, become more mature, become more professionals, Rasmus Dahlin, number 1, and Dylan Cozens, number 2. Dahlin is more so backed it up with his play this year. Cozens, not as much. But I think those are the 2 guys that I would put in ink to be wearing a letter going into next year. I don't know if they'll give Dahlin the captaincy right away. My best guess is that he'll be the next Sabres captain. That Dahlin will be the next Sabres captain. That Cozens would end up getting an A and be one of the key leaders on this team. And then I would feel less confident about who the 3rd guy is, but I would imagine Alex Tuch. He's a little bit older than those guys. He's been to the Stanley Cup final. Adams, by the way, said that he got calls on Tuch, 1 call, and then a few more after it was reported that he got a call, but he was never considering trading Alex Tuch whatsoever. Almost sounded annoyed at the fact he had to be asked about it and that people were calling him about Alex Tuch, but Tuch's still on the team. I think he's probably a part of this leadership group. But I think maybe those are the 3. Those may be the 3 to look at in that order. Dahlin, Cozens, and Alex Tuch. Those are the next leaders of this franchise. And that doesn't mean they can't bring in a veteran, but I also don't know if they're necessarily going to. I bet it's a little bit back and forth. When Adams got asked about a guy, a steadying voice to come in and replace Okposo to guide these young players, Adams kind of pushed back on that. Like, hey, man, these guys are young, but Cozens has been in the league for 5 years now. Like, they're experienced, and it's time for them to step up, was the sense that I got. That organization knows that they don't need another round of 35-year-old over-the-hill players because, they need to show these guys how to practice or something. I think you turn the page, and you go with Dahlin, and you go with Cozens to kind of lead the charge. All right. Sabres and Oilers. Saturday at 12:30. Connor McDavid is in town. So keep an eye out for him. He might be out and about. Autographs, Palooza, I've seen around the rinks. So McDavid and the Oilers in town, always a treat to see the best player in the world and the best player that I've ever seen in my life get to play in your hometown. So 12:30 puck drop Saturday. We'll talk about it after the fact, and we'll roll through the rest of the season. We'll spend some more time covering the Amherst, the little by little, as their playoff run begins and the Sabres start to wind down their season here in the final month of the year. That's it for us today here at the Locked On Sabres podcast. Be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. It's available anywhere you get your podcasts. It's first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and also available on the free Fire TV channels app. We'll talk to you next time here in the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.